Well, I've been around a long time, and I've seen a lot of people stepping up in the years that I've had ministry opportunities. And I've seen them step up all over the world. And it's not always to ministry as we would sometimes think of it in a church or in a foreign mission field. Sometimes it's men and women stepping up to their responsibility in the home. It's a dad being a dad, a biological father being a dad. And there's a difference between those two, though they ought to be together, yeah? Or a biological mom being a mother and really being there for kids, whether it's discipline or it's putting their arm around their shoulder, whatever it is. So what I'm talking about today is stepping up. And I am one of those fortunate people to say that my dad taught me that. He taught me how to step up. I don't always do it, and I haven't always done it, but he taught me how to step up because he would do that as well as talk about it. When there was a need, my dad was there. If it was humanly possible, he would be there to step up for people who had needs, whatever those were. And he was in the real estate business, and I was there with him in Washingtonville, New York, a long time ago. And I tell you, whether it was a town affairs or it was something to do with the business world or the church or wherever it was, that's where my dad was. So I know something about stepping up from watching it all those years. It's what Teddy Roosevelt was talking about, and maybe you know this quote, I don't know. It comes from one of his speeches. It's one that I love, and I have it on my computer, on my laptop, on the right side where I can read it and be reminded of it. He said, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, and comes short again and again because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows the great enthusiasm, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat." That's stepping up. That's what it's all about. And there's, maybe this is an old guy talking and worried about the culture around him and the churches around him, but I get the feeling, I get the feeling that stepping up is something that's lost in our culture. It's just kind of missing. I spent 3 years working with a very special group of people in Queens. After I retired, I've gone to a couple of interim ministries, and one of those was in Queens, and it was with a really special group of people. But it was with a group of people who, for reasons I didn't understand at the time, were reluctant to step up, especially the young men and the younger colleagues among them. I could find lots of older people who would step up, but when it came to the younger men in particular, it was hard to find somebody who would say, "Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, I'll take care of that. No, you don't need to worry about that. I'll get that. I've got that. Got it." In fact, I still remember to this day when two of those young men, able young men working in the business world, doing a great job in the business world, came to me and said, "Our ministry is going to close down." They had a ministry to other people from their language group, and it was extremely effective and had borne great fruit in that church and beyond that church in years past. But they said, "We're going to close up shop on the ministry," and they named the ministry that we were talking about. And I said, "Why?" And they said, "Because the folks who have led our ministry over the years now have other obligations. They can't do that anymore, so we don't have any leaders." And I said, "What about you?" And they said, "Oh, no, we can't do that." And I said, "Why can't you do that?" And they said, "Well, in our culture, young men don't step up until the older men invite them to." And I said, "Well, you better change that. Step up to whatever God's calling you to step up to." It's not just that group of people. Now, granted, I know there are some people, and maybe you're among them, who have stepped up so many times that you're exhausted. And you really need a period of time in which you can just sit back and take in. That's fine, understand, got that. That's necessary lots of times for various people. I understand that. But I'm afraid that lots of us don't step because we are either too fearful or maybe lazy or just don't want the responsibility, don't want to do what's needed to do the job, too self-absorbed. Oh, we step up, but we step up through reality TV and video games. That's the only way we get ourselves into the game. Stepping up, stepping up, stepping up. Step up to lead. Step up to give sacrificially. Step up to teach a Sunday school class for the kids. Step up to be the manager in your job place for which you may be qualified. Step up to be the mom that God's called you to be. Step up to be the husband that God's called you to be. I'm not restricting this in any sense. Please don't, in your mind, think that I'm talking about church things. I'm not talking about church things. I'm talking about the various callings to which God brings us, in which we have the opportunity, and we really have the gifting and the skills that are necessary if we'll just trust God and step up like David stepped up with Goliath. Now, most of you, I suspect, will remember the story. It's an awesome story. It's an amazing story about the powerful hand of God working through this young shepherd boy who had no qualifications, at least from the appearance of things, no qualifications whatsoever in terms of taking care of this giant, and he is a giant. I mean, he's 10 feet tall. You translate the words and you translate them over in terms of the meaning. That's exactly what it means. He's just a little bit under 10 feet tall, this Goliath. And do you know what he did? You got the army of the Philistines on one hillside, the army of the Israelites on the other hillside, and here's Goliath on the army of the Philistines, and he's saying, send somebody to fight me. One man, that's all. It was called solo combat. It was used all the time, because the one who won was an expression of the gods or the god behind that one. So why waste all your army when you can just have one man go out there and do the job? And so Goliath is taunting the people of Israel, not about them as much as about their God, that your God can't protect you. So send somebody over and I'll show you that your God can't protect you. And so the taunting goes on for day after day after day, and nobody wants to fight Goliath because it's suicide. Enter David, the shepherd boy, the guy who has been sent by his dad to bring the coffee and donuts to his bigger brothers who are the real soldiers, but they're too smart to volunteer to fight against Goliath. And David shows up. David hears the challenge. He is appalled that anybody would speak of his God like that. So it's not the people of Israel or the armies that he's appalled that they would speak about those armies. No, it's about God. It's about his God. How can you possibly talk that way? So David resolves, I'll go. This is not about me. This is about my God. This is not about Goliath. It's about his gods. And we'll see who's the most powerful. I'll go and I'll fight him, he tells King Saul. And you know the end of the story, don't you? Who wins? David wins. But David says that God wins. So who is it? Is it David or is it God? The answer is yes. Yeah. Here's what David says. He speaks to Goliath. He says, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defiled. This day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. David or God? Yes. It's David, and it's God. He's stepping up. What we need to do is look at the story behind the story. What Paul Harvey, a couple of you might remember, said the rest of the story. I see you. I know who's laughing because you knew who I'm talking about. Some of you have no idea who Paul. That's okay. It doesn't matter. What's the rest of the story for David? I have to tell you that I'm indebted to Malcolm Gladwell, who wrote a book called David and Goliath. Actually, just the first chapter is about David and Goliath, and it's about how the small man wins. And he goes through all kinds of different settings where the unexpected person or army or team wins, even though they shouldn't have won, but Gladwell does a wonderful job with it. In fact, I heard him in an interview. He returns to his faith because he delves into the scriptures and what goes on with Goliath and how God worked with David and how God worked through David. So I commend that book to you. But Gladwell and others before him, he's not the only one, points out that Goliath has weaknesses, and David knows that Goliath has weaknesses. For instance, he apparently has health issues. You say health issues. Yeah, I said health issues. More than likely has a tumor on his pituitary gland. You say, this is crazy. How do you say that? Well, he's so big. He's almost 10 feet tall. That's what happens when the pituitary gland is attacked by a tumor. Person grows to proportions that they typically wouldn't be, but that is typical of that condition. And so you have this mammoth man, almost 10 feet tall, wears a bronze helmet and a full body armor, which is, it tells us 125 pounds just for the body armor. He's got a javelin, he's got a spear, and he's likely got a sword as well. So you can see what kind of man this is. You can see the size in him if you think about those dimensions. In fact, I couldn't help but think that getting next to him is like getting under the boards with LeBron. And you look at this guy who's, I think he's 6'9" and 250 pounds. Well, that's it. That's exactly what you're doing. And he said, come on. Show a little courage. Come on. Well, the rest of them don't want to do it. In fact, more than likely, if this is true that he has the pituitary gland tumor, which he likely does, he needs glasses. And they didn't have glasses at the time. Or he forgot his. I'm not sure which. They were back in his hut. I'm not sure where they were. But he didn't have any glasses with him, of course. But he needed glasses. And in fact, that too is typical of people with a pituitary gland tumor. He's probably short-sighted. He probably has double vision, problems with balance, common for people with a pituitary gland disorder like he more than likely had. You imagine, here he is, he's big and he's strong and he's threatening, he's intimidating, but he's got all this problem. He can't see straight, he can't see what's going on, he can't keep his balance. How do you see that? Well, the attendant goes before him. He doesn't need an attendant. Soldiers carried their own shields. He didn't need an attendant. Well, Goliath needed an attendant. Beyond that, he has to get closer, or he wants David to get closer to him. If you'll read 1 Samuel 17 sometime, you'll find that he say, come on, come over here, come over here, come over here. And in fact, when David won't come closer, Goliath goes closer to David because he's got to get closer because he can see him. He can't see him well. He's got a problem. And further, he thinks David has sticks, plural. David doesn't have sticks. Why would he think he had sticks? Double vision. Common for people like that. And he says, come here, come here, come here. And when David won't come closer, he goes closer to David. Why? So he can see him. So he can see him. Health issues. Add to that, and some of you who have had this, and I've had it too, know how threatening this is. Maybe worse than the health issues is overconfidence. And what we see in Goliath is clearly a case of overconfidence. He is brash. He insults the God of Israel. He insults the armies of Israel. He can't imagine losing. And when he sees this young pup come after him, he feels like he's a little dog, a chihuahua at his feet, barking at him. He can't do anything to him, but that's what he thinks of him as in those terms. Listen to what he says in 1 Samuel 17, 42. He looked David over and saw that he was only a boy, ruddy and handsome, and he despised him. What an insult. Not even a contest. And David knows this. He may not know about the pituitary gland, all the background behind it, but he knows there's something wrong with the man. But David knows something else. David knows that David has strengths. David has strengths. David is trusting God. He has what Brennan Manning, one of my favorite authors, who, if you want to talk about the heart, go to Brennan Manning's writings and read some of his books. Such profound teaching from a man who had broken his rules and his standards a million times, but yet God always brought him back. He developed an idea, and he has a book called this, Ruthless Trust. Ruthless trust is the kind of thing that David exhibits here in this passage and in this this portion of his life. It is trusting God no matter what. And what that gives him is it gives him the power to win. To win. Listen to what David says. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of the Philistine. So King Saul, to whom he was talking, said to David, go and the Lord be with you. But he also has the power to lose because he's trusting God. He has what Jesus would talk about a century later: whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for me will find it. You know, it's almost like those young men who went into the fiery furnace. Before they went into the fiery furnace, they said to the king, you know, you can throw us into the fiery furnace. We're convinced that our God will take care of us. But if he doesn't, we're still not going to bow down before you. That's what he's doing. That's what David's doing. I win, I lose, I win. Either way, what are you going to do to me? Not much. Not much. Here's my definition of ruthless trust. I hope Manning, who's now in heaven, would agree with this, but I think this is exactly what he was talking about in my summary. I have my plans. I have prepared. I have prayed. I am confident in the way this battle will turn out. But if God has other plans, then I will trust myself into his hands. How do you be somebody like that? I mean, really? I win, I lose, I win. I lose, I win, I win. It just goes back and forth. I win. No matter what you do to me, Goliath, I win. People like that can lay aside everything because there's just no way they can lose because it's all there. And they got a God they're trusting who can take care of that and keep it for them and make sure they get it. Whether it's here or it's in heaven. It's an amazing combination for anybody. They can't lose. Like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, you've probably heard of him before. World War II, he's a pastor in Germany. He gets a chance to get out of Germany. He takes it because he's under threat from the Nazis. They know that he is against them. He talks against them. He raises up leaders against them. He's involved in all that. So he goes, and he finally comes to New York City. And in New York City, he teaches at Union Seminary. But as he teaches at Union Seminary, his own testimony is that he goes to a black church in Harlem, and in that black church, there's something really special that happens between Dietrich Bonhoeffer and Jesus. It becomes more personal than it ever was before. And here he is safe and sound. He could go all over the country, and he could teach as a guest teacher and lecturer in various seminaries, but he chooses not to. He chooses to go back to Nazi Germany and to live under the thugs there and to oppose them and to teach other people to live outside their boundaries. And he goes to a camp where he is put to death weeks before the Allied troops come through. Did he win or lose? He won. So that's what I'm talking about. That's it. Hey, how do you beat a guy like that? You can't. Because he's learned to trust in the living God. He's walking in faith. He's like the Apostle Paul, who says, I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. Life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. If I die, I win. If I stay, I win. What do you want, Lord? I'm stepping up. I don't care. I'm stepping up. So he's got trust in the living God, but there's something else that's really interesting to me in this passage and so highly applicable to me, and that is he is ready for battle. This guy, this is not his first time at the plate. In fact, when he goes to talk to King Saul, he talks about it to King Saul. In chapter 17, verse 34 and 35, he says, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. I just have a hard time thinking about that. You know, it makes my hair ache when I think about that. I strike it, it turns on me, then I kill it. And this is not even with a sling. This is close. If he grabs it and he kills it. A lion. He knows how to handle himself. Is he still trusting God? Yes. Is he Is he equipped to do the battle? Yes. Yeah, he's ready for battle. That's the picture you get when you look at him. He knows what he's doing. And the third thing that I think I see in here is that he uses his head. He is a thinker. And there's a little bit of background to this that Gladwell is especially good at bringing forward. Ancient armies had three kinds of warrior. They had cavalry. You know what cavalry does? Cavalry. I used to serve in a church called Calvary. That's different than cavalry, isn't it? Yeah, this is cavalry. They ride horses, don't they? And infantry, they're the guys who walk along the ground that I never wanted to be, so I went in the Air Force instead of that, okay? All right? Especially through the rice paddies of Vietnam at the time. So that you've got the infantry, and they're walking along. And then you have what was called projectile warriors. And projectile warriors shot arrows, and they used slings. You can see where this thing is going. Goliath, infantry. David, projectile warrior. For years, he's been a projectile warrior, though he's keeping sheep and taking care of the sheep. What was Goliath expecting? Infantry. That's why he wanted to get close to him. You engage in infantry. You're close, especially when you don't have a blunderbuss, or you don't have a M14, or you don't. Yeah, you're close to each other, and that's exactly what he was expecting. He says, "Come to me." Why was the sling the perfect weapon? Well, the sling was beautiful because he didn't have to get close to him. He could be at a distance from him. Goliath wanted him to come close because he wanted to get his hands on him. He wanted to hit him with a spear or his sword, but he couldn't if he was too far away. And so David stays his distance wisely, and that's possible because of the weapon that he's using. Goliath couldn't see him clearly. He thought there were two sticks that David was carrying. If he's carrying one, that's plenty. He's not carrying two. Scripture says it is a stick he was carrying, and that he may have even laid down before he got to the battle line. The joke is on us and Saul. Saul wanted David to wear his armor. David tried to put it on. He put it on. He says, "It's too heavy. I can't move. I especially can't go quickly. I can't use this stuff." So he takes his armor off. That's the king's armor. If there's anything going to give me good luck, it's the king's armor. Sure, I'm going to wear the king's armor. No, he's not. No, he's not. You know, the joke is on us because we thought that God made up for the weakness of the man and for his puny little weapon. And he magnified himself because he chose a guy who wasn't qualified. Oh, the joke's on us. David was small so he could move quickly. David was small so he couldn't even be seen very well. David had a sling which was the best weapon he could have possibly used. We're not so smart after all. God knew exactly what he was doing when he chose David, and David used his sling. He's small, he's fast. He uses a weapon that keeps him out of the grasp of Goliath, the giant, who would have surely crushed him if he could get his hands on him. And he used that sling, which you can bet he had employed for years and years and years and years. Eitan Hirsch says that David could have slung and hit Goliath in little more than 1 second. A stone hurled by an expert slinger at a distance of 35 meters, it's about 115 feet, would have hit Goliath's head with a velocity of 34 meters per second, with a stopping power equivalent to a fair-sized modern handgun. Hirsch would know. He's a ballistics expert with the Israeli Defense Forces. 1 second is all it took. And David didn't have to get close. Though when Saul goes down, or when Goliath goes down, he comes close and he finalizes the victory. Yeah, David is trusting God. David is ready. David is using his head. That's the rest of the story for David. The question is, what's the rest of the story for us? As we step up to be the dads or the husbands we need to be, or the Sunday school teachers we need to be, or the life group, grow group leaders we need to be. What do we need? Well, we need someplace firm to stand. Got to stand on something firm. Ilona and I were at the shore last summer, I think it was, and we went to a restaurant at the shore, and as we waited for our table to be ready, we went for a walk out back, and out back is there's a bar there, but behind the bar there's a dock. And I got on the dock, and I felt pretty good getting on the dock, but then I found out it was one of those aluminum docks, and it was going like this. I'm thinking, I don't think I want to do this. Nothing to hold on to except the posts that come every once in a while. You can't fight a battle on that kind of a base, foundation. You got to have something stronger than that. You got to have something strong to rest yourself on, to keep you steady in the midst of the battle. When you feel like you can't do it anymore, you got to have something underneath you that will hold you up and not allow you to get blown over by your opponent, whatever your opponent is, or whatever the challenges that you face. And that is all about trusting God. We need a firm place to stand. My friends, your training and your abilities and your education alone, they're simply not enough. They're not enough. Your strategy, your ways of doing things, your ideas alone, they're not enough. Your energy, your pace, your youthfulness, your alone, it's not enough. It just won't do the job. Ruthless trust is what you need. And that ruthless trust comes from walking personally with Jesus, your hand in his hand, so that when you trip, he pulls you up. And after a while, you look back and you saw all those places where I stumbled and I tripped and I almost fell down, and he was there and he picked me up. That's what ruthless trust comes from. It comes from the experience of walking with Jesus and knowing that he's there. And in spite of your foolishness and bad choices, he's still there. He's there. But the only way to get that is to experience it. That doesn't come from a book, even from the Bible. It comes from walking with him. What else do we need besides a firm place to stand? Well, we need the weapons that God has provided. That's what David had. It wasn't the most impressive weapon. It'd be more impressive if he could go with a sword and a spear and kill Goliath with that alone. But that's not what God gave to him. God gave him a sling. And he uses the sling, and the sling is exactly what he needs. He doesn't even want Saul's armor, the king's armor. He said, I can't wear that stuff. I can't move the way I'm supposed to. This is the way God made me for this battle, and I'm going to use my own weapon. I'm going to be me in fighting the battle, nothing else. God has given David what David needs, and he's done that for you and for me as well. He's given you spiritual gifts. He's given you passions. He's given you interests. He's given you education. He's given you training. He's given you a personality. He's given you experience. He's given you all that stuff. And you know what that does? He takes that and he molds all that stuff so that when it comes to the battle that he sets you forth in, you're ready for that battle. I remember 2001, I don't know, something like that. I'd been at Millington for 20 years, and I felt like Millington was outgrowing us and outgrowing me, not us, but me. And I had to leave or I had to become a CEO. That was my problem. I'm not a CEO. I love CEOs. If you're a CEO, God bless you. I'm just not a CEO. But I felt like I had to either leave or become a CEO, and so I got a mentor. And the guy had just recently retired early from corporate world, and he was a mammoth CEO. And so I said, teach me how to do these things. And so he set about teaching me how to do these things. Well, I'm a terrible student because I couldn't get it. And the more I couldn't get it, the more I sunk into depression. The more I sunk into depression, finally one guy confronted me, my staff guy, and he said, you've got to go see somebody. Only he said it with 4-letter words I can't say here, or Andrew would beep them. That's what he said to me. And so I went and saw somebody. I realized I was trying to become somebody I wasn't and could never be. Now, within who I am, I can stretch that, and I can become better at that and be more of that, but I can't become somebody else. And thank God, Judy Iannacone, who was my secretary at the time, came by my office one day. She's in heaven now, but boy, she was there for that purpose. She came by the office. She said, we love you the way you are. You don't have to become somebody else. And neither do you. You just be the guy that God created you to be and gifted you to be and gave you the experiences to be. Gave you the training to be and gave you the talents to be and the spiritual gifts to be. You just bring that to the table. Like David brought his sling to the table. He said, this is all I got. I can't win if I get close to Goliath, but I can win with this. Because this is the way you equipped me, Lord. I can do it with this. So you take the weapons that God has provided. You're standing on the solid rock of walking with God in Jesus Christ. And then we need clear thinking. This is not a child's game, friend. If you go into it thinking, oh yeah, I'm just going to show up, don't do that. You've got an opponent that is empowered many times by the enemy. And Jesus said, if you're going to build a tower, you better start thinking about how you're going to build a tower. And you better plan the cost and map it out and think of what you're doing. Clear thinking. A pastor can't build a building and assume they'll come. A CEO has to have a marketing department. A mom needs other moms in a similar life setting or just a little bit ahead of her or farther ahead of her so that she can find out, what do I do now? I mean, I don't know what to do now. And a dad needs other dads to hold his hand and to say, yeah, you can do this. You just set the limits for that child. And you draw the lines and you enforce them. But you don't do that alone. And you learn from others who have already been there. An evangelist needs to study the culture where he or she is going to present the gospel so that you know ahead of time what's going to come back and you can prepare in some sense for it, not definitively, but you can do something. So you plan, you work through it, you try to think it through. Clear thinking. It's not a child's game. It wasn't for David. It's not for us. Listen, God is calling us to step up. I'm a granddad. I'm still called to step up. I retired from 30 years at one church. I'm still called to step up. I set my sights a long time ago on finishing well. I don't know how close I am to being done, but I'm still trying to finish well. So I got to have something solid like this platform to stand on. I just can't be on something that moves. So I got to walk with Jesus, have my hand in his, experience his grace and his love and his forgiveness on a daily basis, know he's there, weep when I see him, rejoice in the goodness of God. Then I need to take whatever God's given me over the years, employ that in the battle that he has called me to wage, whatever Goliath is for me, whatever Goliath is for you. And then I think clearly as I go. One of the neatest things for me now, 40 years, I was ordained at 75, so it's been longer than the 30. We were 6 years in Ossining, and then we've been on Basking Ridge as retired, semi-retired now, and I preach in a lot of places and love on pastors because pastors need to be loved on. So do their wives. It's a hard job. It's a hard job. So anyway, that's what I do. One of the greatest things for me now is to look back on the people who have stepped up. And one of the places where I preach on a regular basis is Renaissance Church in Summit, New Jersey. And I'm part of the rotation there on a pretty frequent basis. And one of the guys there is an elder now, and he's giving leadership in the church. But I remember him when I first went to him at Millington Baptist Church, and I said, I really need somebody to lead the missions team here at Millington Baptist. Would you do that? And he's a young guy. He commutes into the city. He's got kids. I don't have any time. I get on the train at 7 in the morning. I get off the train at 7 at night. I got 3 kids. I got a wife. I got so many things to do. I got to mow the lawn. I got to do this, and I got to do this. And that's the kind of response you come to expect. And so in your mind, you're thinking, I'll go on to somebody else. But you say what you're supposed to say. Would you pray about it? Not expecting him to. Because that's just what you say. 3 weeks later, he comes back to me at the door and he says, I think I need to do that. And I'm as surprised as I can be. Now he's stepping up to lead in a church in Summit, New Jersey as an elder. Because that's what God does. When I step up to this, he's getting me ready to step up to that. And then he's getting me ready to step up to that, and then that, and then stand before him. It's time to step up. And I don't know what that means for you. And I said before, don't restrict that to church stuff. Please don't do that. Church, yes. Home, yes. Work, yes. Neighborhood, yes. Wherever it is, friend, you need to step up. just like you are. Not putting it off and say, well, in 5 years, I'll be ready to do. No. If God's calling you to do something now, it is going to be beyond you. I should have said that earlier. Whatever God calls us to step up to is bigger than we are. And it feels like we can't possibly do the job. If it's not bigger than you, don't bother. You're not thinking big enough. You're not hearing God's voice. Because when God calls, he says, I want you to step up for something like a Goliath. And your normal response is, I'm afraid of that. I can't do that. That's okay to respond that way until you come around and begin to think, oh yeah, David stepped up. I can do that. Power of God with what God has given me. Step up. We're going to have a song after I'm done, and I think we're going to be passing the offering plates at the beginning of that song. But I'm going to ask you to do something really strange, if you would. For men and women who can identify, I need to step up in this area, I'm going to ask you to take that bulletin, and I think the outline is in there for what I've done today. I'm going to ask you to take out a pen and drive a stake in the ground. And here's how you do it. You just take that piece of paper on the bottom, you tear off a little page, little portion of it, and you write down 1-2 words. Doesn't have to be a sentence, but to you, it signifies the spot where you're going to step up. And you're saying to God, okay, I'm going to step up. And this is the area. And then I'm going to ask you to do something really outlandish. I'm going to ask you to tear it off and bring it up and leave it on the steps like you'd leave it on an altar before God. Yeah? Now, I know you can sit still and do that, but I find that when I take a physical step, there's something about that really seals it, drives it home. Maybe partly because when I get home, my wife is going to say, what were you putting on that paper? And I'm going to have to become accountable for it, or my friend is, or somebody is, and I'm going to have to be accountable because I've taken a step that says, I'm going to step up. And I'm not doing this any longer. Sitting in the back row. I'm not talking about this back row. You find the back row, okay? I'm going to do that. So after the offering plates go by your row, then if God has been speaking to you about stepping up in a particular area and you're ready to drive a stake and say, yes, God, you got my attention. I hear you. I know what you've given me, or I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to think about it. I'm going to get advice. I'm going to get some input. But I am done sitting in the back row of my life, and I am from this point going to step up in that area and begin to explore what I do after the first step. And you're going to seal that by bringing it forward, leaving it on the steps here. We'll throw it away. Nobody else is going to look at it. Doesn't matter to me what it says on it. In fact, if I read it, I probably wouldn't understand what it was because you've got initials on there, or you've got some word that doesn't relate to something I can understand. So don't worry about what's going to happen to those. It won't matter. You put your code on it, but don't miss a chance to step up. Take the first step today.